Many Mexicans and people who were in touch with this case say, like, I mean, we live in a democracy. We live in a country that we're supposed to have liberties. We have authorities. We have a division of powers, a state, and Mexico is very powerful about authorities. And this is happening now. 43 persons. We don't know where they are.
No one can act with impunity.
These are crimes that are beyond the pale.
We are talking about human beings. We're not talking about numbers.
We need a court. That's as simple as that.
This is Asymmetrical Haircuts, your international justice podcast with Janet Anderson and Stephanie van den Berg. This episode was produced in partnership with justiceinfo.net.
All rise.
Hi, Steph.
Hi, Janet.
Well, today we have the chance to focus on a region that should definitely be more on our radar, which is Central America.
Today we're going to discuss Mexico and institutional violence and its justice system. And we're going to start with an emblematic case. It's one of the country's most infamous human rights cases that took place over 10 years ago.
We're going to give some of the details for those who haven't followed. Our producer Margarita has prepared this, so it's Margaritapedia pronounced by Steph. Here you go.
So the details in this case are that on the night of September 26, 2014, 43 students disappeared from the Raúl Isidro Burgos Rural Normal School, commonly known as the Ayotzinapa Rural Normal School. This male teachers' college is located in the municipality of Tixtla in the state of Guerrero, and it's approximately 300 kilometers south of Mexico City, and it was known for its social justice activism.
Yeah, on that day in September, which was just over 10 years ago, the commemoration of 300 people who had been massacred by the government during a protest in 1968 was due to be held, and the students were planning to steal or maybe take buses to go and participate. Initially, the state authorities said that the students had been abducted and killed by a local gang in Iguala, the Guerreros Unidos. However, later investigations found that the abduction operation involved not only members of that Guerreros Unidos, but also local, state and federal police. And the disappearance of the 43 students is still reverberating in Mexico today. Last September, there were big marches that took place to commemorate the students and to demand truth and justice.
Yeah, I remember this being a big story 10 years ago, together with a lot of stories of disappearances in Mexico. And to unpack all of this for us, we have Omar Gómez Trejo, the former head prosecutor of the Special Criminal Unit created to investigate the Ayotzinapa case. Hi, Omar.
Hi, how you doing, Janet? How you doing, Stephanie? Thank you so much for this invitation and talk about this important case in Mexico.
And I think Omar will be very polite about our pronunciation all the way through, but I'm sure listeners will work out that neither Steph or I are natural Spanish speakers, but we were going to do our best, and Omar will correct us as needed. He's worked for 12 years in the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights at the UN in different countries and been involved with the group of experts for that case, appointed by the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights before becoming lead prosecutor for the case in 2019. But then a few years later, in 2022, he decided to leave Mexico after mounting pressure on him and on the investigation by the then President Andrés Manuel López Obrador. And currently he's a visitor at the Human Rights Center in the law school in Berkeley University in the United States. So we've got 43 disappeared students. And again, I know we've got different stories that came out at different times. Can you kind of run us through what we knew when and what we know now about those disappearances?
Before we go into this story of the specifics of 43 disappearances, we should say that Mexico is a country where approximately 170,000 people are currently missing and where 85% of crimes remain unsolved.
Yeah, I think that's a really good bit of context to give. So this is very much an emblematic crime or alleged crime that we're speaking about. But yeah, run through the detail for us, Omar. What do we know happened, or do we know what happened?
Yeah, it's as you said at the beginning, the case just happened in 2014. Then immediately the Attorney General office at the federal level, as you know, Mexico have three different levels: federal, state, and municipality. The federal level tracked the case, and they in 1 month determinate the whereabouts the students were and the history that they pronounce it and call it historical truth. Obviously, there was a really fast investigation, and this was created, like I say, for political reasons and also for social reasons, because the people was in the streets demanding they return the students alive into their families. Also, these social crises reflect the disappearance that nobody talks about it. In that, during those days, we already have like 35,000 people disappear. This is probably one of the main steps that families and lawyers took. They raised the anger and the sort of movement. They took it to international and mechanism. And this is the Inter-American Commission for Human Rights using the provisional measures. And that's how the group of experts came to Mexico and started investigating the case.
So you say that Omar, that this that the government came up with this explanation of what happened, or the historical truth. Can you explain what exactly came out of that investigation that we now know is a kind of cover-up, but just for our listeners who probably aren't as into the details, what was the story
Of
that
course.
they came up with?
Yeah, the government in 2014 came with a history that the 43 students were burned in a dump. The place where this dump is the municipality of Cocula in Guerrero, and also by the hand of the Guerreros Unidos cartel, who operates in the area of the state of Guerrero. And during one night, they just burn into ashes the students. So they make like a pile with the 43 bodies, and they at the other day they just recover the remains and put it in plastic bags and drop in a river, the river named Cocula. So with this history, the last government wanted to give an answer for the social movement, but also for the families, sending the message: go back to your places, and this is the way like you keep your kids end. And obviously, the families did not accept that version, and they resist of that. So that's how they go to international mechanisms, and the international mechanism is open to receive these demands, and they create this group of experts. So the first thing that the first report that the group of experts revealed is that it could not be possible that the group of the students were burned in that place. So this create also another big impact in Mexico. You know, you talk about the larger scale of impunity. And like I say, during those days, you have more than 35,000 people disappeared. So this just like sound like a crisis in Mexico. And also the experts released a second report, and they start talking more about this cover up and how the Mexican authorities created. Obviously, the Mexican authorities said no more, and this just did not renew the mandate of the experts.
At what stage then did you get involved? I mean, later on, I know you became the prosecutor on this case, 2019. Was that kind of as a result of social pressure or political pressure, and said, "Come on, we've actually got to work on this properly"? Was that the idea of bringing somebody like you in?
No, this is 2015, 16, but the experts works. I work with the experts as the executive secretary. Even an international inter-American system, this was a new model of something like close to the fact-finding missions in the UN, close to this kind of task enforce tax investigation groups. This is something similar to that. And then a couple years happened between the experts leave Mexico in 2016 and the new government arrives in 2018. So in that time, I worked with the Inter-American Commission, because the Inter-American Commission, when the experts leave the country, they create a special mechanism, a follow-up mechanism to follow up the recommendation of the experts that lives in Mexico and the government. So they invited me to be part of this mechanism in Washington D.C. So from Washington D.C., I was monitoring the case with another group of people who was working in that team. And and then when the new government arrives, I mean the lefty government, Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, the president, was the election. They invited me to be part of the special unit that they create to investigate this case. So this is the in a short time that I took several positions working in this case. So I've been working this case for many close to 8 years, 9 years since it happened because I was documenting when this case happened. I was working in Mexico with the UN Office of the High Commissioner. So they sent me as an observer, as a officer, human rights officer, to observe and start conducting interviews to the survivors of the case. I mean, the students and also the family members. So that was 4 or 5 days later that I knew the case and they hooked me up as something like I just wanted to explain it because that's probably that many Mexicans and people who were in touch with this case say like, I mean, we live in a democracy. We live in a country that we're supposed to have liberties. We have authorities. We have a division of powers, a state, and Mexico is very powerful about authorities, and this is happening now. 43 persons, we don't know where they are. So that's probably the main important. And also, I remember it really touched me in my heart. Saw the families like the way like the struggle what they did and the way like they asking and demanding from the government the kids return to their parents. So this is the way like I hook up with the case and then working in different places in the US system with this Office of the High Commissioner, then this group of experts, then the Inter-American Commission, and then the chief leader of this unit that the government create to conduct investigations.
You are appointed to do this case as a prosecutor in 2019. You've been involved with this for many years, so I assume you can kind of hit the ground running. But can you explain a bit what is the state of the investigation and what challenges did you face? I know there's a lot of reports about gang violence in Mexico. This was reportedly also about the Guerreros Unidos. Should I imagine you with like security around the clock because you are also having maybe if the military is involved, that's problematic. How does that look when you actually become the prosecutor?
Yeah, that was really challenging. That position was probably the most challenging word that I had in my life. Well, first than anything, I did like several kind of measures to when I arrived in the investigation. As you know, I was involved in the investigations at the beginning, so I know many details about many information. First than anything, I tried to create a team because that was kind of hard. When I just started working in that office, it was like 70 people just working there. I didn't even know what they did. So I started like creating a new team because I knew it was the challenge that we have in front. It needs people with a lot of commitment, brave, and also with the new ideas to take out the case out of the where it was. They had like 800 files, docs of documents, each doc like 1,000 pages repeated for 3 times. This was like a complete room with these evidences and paper. In Mexico, they had this expression, the paper can holds everything. That was probably the first challenge, to have the pieces of the investigation that it really works for the new investigation that we wanted to conduct. So we started receiving new witnesses. We did positive things to conduct and used to take the investigation in a different step. But part of the big things that we had to deal with, it was the system by itself. Inside the Attorney General office, but also by the political pressures from different entities in the government in Mexico, because they knew it. What was in or what happened. They knew what happened in that case. So part of the first thing that we tried to break it was this is not only a case for municipality authorities and a local gang. This is something different. And for example, the first indictments they produced in 2013, it was of the crime of kidnapping, not the crime of enforced disappearance. And obviously, we changed that immediately because we were in front in a case of enforced disappearance where the authorities were involved in the detention. And that was the first thing we got it. So the security was a thing, but also I remember people from inside that work in my office. When I arrived, they took documents and files from my office. It was people working for some other reasons from some other people working in my office. So I tried to, an expression like cleaning the house, as that was probably the first measure that I need to take. And also start looking for evidences. And for example, we deal with a lot of lack of information from several authorities because they don't want it to know the truth. They don't want to provide the information for that. And it was kind of hard because this was a decision by the president because he created a truth commission. They bring back the group of experts and all together we try to work, but we deal with that. We deal with this lack of information, but we deal with that. I mean, in the investigation, in a political environment, in the environment inside the attorney general office, which is many people probably doesn't work for justice, they work for some other interests. And I remember my first day when I stepped there, and I was in front of the people. I just started conducting interviews for the people with the people around the office, and they say, "You're not gonna do anything. You're not gonna move anything. This is the big decision from 20 floors away from here, Omar. Say you're not gonna do anything." So that was the first challenge, and try to change the way like the people see justice in Mexico.
You also mentioned that you actually, because of one of your previous roles, met the families even just a few days after the disappearances had taken place. I'm certainly conscious from some of the people that I've met who've passed through The Hague, who've been involved as human rights defenders, civil society, who've worked on getting evidence and from this case. So I wonder if you could tell us a bit about what role families, what role civil society played in terms of getting the truth out about this.
Oh yeah, I think the families are the center of this case. The families has been in struggle for 10 years, showing big dignity and an amazing work to move the system. And also with the vision, because this is very creative vision about the lawyers and the NGOs around the families. Because, for example, they produce this group of experts, but they provide ideas to produce the special mechanism. And also, when the last government arrived, they work together with the authorities to ensemble like this machinery, like a truth commission and a special unit to investigate the case, just specifically this case, and also bring back the experts. So they very relevant, they very important in this case. Now we're waiting, for example, that we had a meeting with the new president, Sheinbaum, and we will see what will be the scope and the vision what this new government has about this important case.
Yeah, let me just press you a little bit on the case itself. I mean, you came to some conclusions, I'm sure, as a prosecutor. Of course, it would still have to go to trial in the end. But who do you think the finger points at as being responsible?
You know, I just can't go deep, like provide details about the case because I have a responsibility. I was the prosecutor, so I can't talk, very deep. But what is public is, I mean, we indict people of the three levels in Mexico. Like I said, it was not only the responsibility of municipality authorities, it was the responsibility of people who work for the state level and federal level who be there and they never say anything. And also, one of the important things we discovered is an evidences was this link between Iguala and Chicago. So this became a transnational crime. The Guerreros Unidos export drugs or trafficking drugs from Iguala Guerrero, and they conduct buses or trucks loaded with drugs to the border in Mexico, and they cross the border and it arrives in Chicago. So part of the work of the expert discovered this link between cartel members in Chicago and also in Iguala, and they talk. during part of the night with 26th September and the 27th September 2014. So when we gather, we're looking for very hard for these evidences as a wiretaps recorded by U.S. authorities in Chicago. So we recover that information and bring it to the investigation that we had in 2022. And we indict several authorities, federal level, because they were reflected the activities they conduct with the cartel members in those wiretaps. And that's part of the army, of the members of the army that me and my team indict during those days in August 2022. And that's probably the main idea or the mobile of this case. It was probably protect those buses, because probably the students took a couple buses loaded with drugs. So that was part of the mobile. And also, this is how it happens, the Mexican authorities working with the cartel members. So we discovered that. So that gives us a scope and an idea and a context. So if they do it everywhere, anytime, why they didn't do it during the night of the disappearance. And we indict many members of the cartel. I mean, many authorities. And also, in my investigation, like I said, we gathered the whole information together. We indict several people for the cover up to protect something. And that was probably part of the cartel member and activities they had together.
So this case is almost 10 years ago, but it revealed this connection between kind of government corruption and drug cartel violence in Mexico. What can we say about the state of government corruption and cartel violence now? Are there other cases in Mexico that kind of reveal similar links?
Well, these big famous trials in U.S., where, for example, Genaro Garcia Luna, which was the Secretary of Security in Mexico during the Calderon administration, he was indicted and judged by federal court in the U.S. And it reflects that, the link between impunity, corruption, and violence in Mexico.
Can you also just provide the update on what remains have been found?
I mean, we conduct also in this unit search, and we did search based on the people who commit the crimes, offering benefits, because the Mexican law give you the opportunity to provide benefits to people who can break the silence and give you information to determine whereabouts the students or probably know more about the case and what happened that night. So we worked very, very hard in that. And we find a different place from the Coca-Cola Dome where they supposed they burn the students. And we find the remains of two students, Christian Alfonso Rodriguez de Lumbre and Josivani Guerrero de la Cruz. This was a big, large process because we find those small remains very damaged. And then the forensics and experts work in the lab and they just select a couple pieces from what they think they will be worked to send them to Innsbruck, Austria, to the university. They had a specialized laboratory that can determine DNA by DNA analysis who those remains belong. Obviously, this was imagine that changed the history of the narrative of the case, changed the history to the lines of investigation, criminally speaking, and also it gives a hope that we can find and looking for the rest of the students. We couldn't have that opportunity. I mean, we resigned, they remove us away from the investigation, but I hope the actual authorities can conduct those searches to find the students.
So you've discussed there the two very important remains that you found. Any others? What is the total that have been found so far?
I mean, we conduct many exercises of search, like in cemeteries, in landfills, mountains. We walk a lot the mountains around Guerrero because it was not only Iguala. A part of the main and the clear ideas that we had, it was the students were never together. They were split. They were separated by different parts of the between authorities and cartel members. So that sounds like the perfect crime. And forced disappearance is not just disappear and never knew about a person. It's also disappear the evidences that can lead you to the responsible people who did this, who committed crime. So, find any evidences of these kind of crimes is like, it's very important. And we conduct like close to 70 exercise of search, like working for months in a place. And we recover also people from another cases, which is really sad, but also it was like someone returns to their family members. And in that area where we recovered Christian and Josivani Ibon's remains, we recovered like 1,200 pieces. And then it works only 20. And then only two pieces can give you an identification. So we hope that the technology and the science in the future can do something else with those remains. I mean, those remains now are in custody of the authorities to see what's next in the future. We got the history how those remain bones probably arrived in that mountain. And also you connected with the detention and probably places where they could take it and who had the responsibility of the custody in the student during that time. But then there's a silence in the investigation that I never had. We can just talk and say like, yes, this is the way Eddie happens the case. But that's not the responsibility of a prosecutor. The prosecutor have to be very reserved and very carefully about what expressed publicly and also with the family members. Because if you say something that is not supported by evidence, you create an expectation that you don't need because sometimes that will be played against you. So we were very carefully. So this is when I just leave the investigation in my time. We have several pieces, like a big puzzle. We got several pieces there. I think we were very lucky to 5, 6 years later find evidences about this case. But you can't, and I say this with a lot of responsibility. We did not have a complete narrative about what happened with the students during that night.
I want to shout back here to another podcast we did on the crime of enforced disappearance, where we also go into the extra kind of stress that it puts on family members to not know where their loved ones are. We're going to go to discussing the context of Mexico's systemic criminal justice problems a little later. But Omar, can you say something about the pressure that was mounting on you and why you decided to leave?
Well, I was appointed in June 2019, and me and my team worked in this case for 3 years and 3 months. By in August 2022, the president and other high-ranking authorities took several decisions to move the case forward. But these kind of decisions were involved to try to push the criminal investigation, which is not the right way to do it. As you know, in Mexico, we have a independent and autonomous attorney general office. And that's part of the principle of independence. It does have not to receive any push or influence by political actors. So we were working like the way we did since the beginning and try to produce justice, find truth for the family. And those political decisions were the main factor that I took a decision to resign my position as a chief leader of this group of people to working on a Ayotzinapa case. The decision was to indict the former attorney general in the last government who were involved in the cover-ups to create they create about this case in Ayotzinapa. And the first government tried to create a cover-up just to close the case for the social pressure, but also for the pressure of the families. And also when the president Andres Manuel López Obrador arrived in the government, he created like several important things to produce justice and truth. So, like I said, we were working really good. We're doing our job. We put people in prison. We find great evidences to conduct investigations, but he wanted to make an influence, like put this big leader of this the attorney general, the former attorney general, in prison, and we did not feel like ready to do that as prosecutors, and also it was a number of several army members to produce this resolution, but the president pushed the office and determined it to be finished as with my resignation.
You've also left Mexico. Can you take us a bit into that decision to leave, and how does it feel to work in the justice field in the country? What's at stake for you personally, and what are the interests you're trying to balance in making that decision?
Yeah, in 2022 October, we need to leave Mexico because they removed me from my position. I mean, I resigned, but obviously it was, a lot of force moved me and wanted to take me away from that position because probably we were too close of the case. And they removed the custody. They, as you know, this high profile case, I had people around me to take care of me in my house, in the street, in everywhere. And they removed that custody from me. And the president AMLO started saying in the mañaneras, the press conference every morning he has, that I was a person who wanted to create like a rebellion inside the attorney general office because I didn't follow his instructions, which, like I said, I resigned because this was a clear interference of autonomy and independence of a prosecutor. But the main reason, it was probably personal. I had a baby with 2 months, little one, and I remember I just started to saw her and I said, this is gonna be hard to if we stay here. So we decided to go back to the US and immediately just take the first plane that we can catch and live our life in Mexico. That was a really hard decision. But that was not the first time. The first time I left Mexico, I flew Mexico, was in 2016 when we finished the second mandate of the group of experts. Because my cell phone was infected by Pegasus, and also I received personal threats in front of my house from people from the attorney general office. That was the first time. So it's two times now that I just need to go outside Mexico, try to do something good, try to bring something to these families, and for Mexico too, because I knew it, and I was really convinced that if we tried, and we wanted to do the things different in this investigation, because being there inside the system, it gives a lot of opportunities to really change the things. But yeah, we need to flee Mexico, and 2 years ago we almost we have 2 years like living outside Mexico now, and like I say, it was hard, but now we just try to rebuild the life and the professional career, do things like it makes sense for probably another cases.
Just to say, for those who don't know, that there's you can find more information. We'll do a link. The Pegasus sort of virus was allegedly put on two different and has been found on different human rights activists' phones around the world. So I think you're the first person I've met who knows that they actually had it on their phone. So I think, Omar, from now on, I'll be asking people, are you also somebody who had Pegasus? Because I assume that it's probably everybody that I know who's had it in one form or another.
We wanted to ask, as a kind of last question, there's over 117,000 people in Mexico that remain missing, and most of the crimes are not prosecuted or investigated with the same vigor and attention for detail that you could put into this case. What is your kind of biggest lesson or your biggest takeaway from trying to bring justice for these victims? What do you really want people to know about what you did and why you did it?
Yeah, it's really sad to talk about impunity in Mexico. I think one important thing that we need to, not me, the Mexican authorities needs to start working with is just to analyze the phenomenon of local areas or with large number of people disappearing, because that's when you analyze the mechanic of the disappearance. I mean, the way like they produce disappearance, who produce it, what are the gains and the incentives. And I mean, you need to understand the crime. You need to understand what is this happening and who are producing this large number of disappearance. I mean, you need to figure out how to resolve these cases, not by the case by case. And you get to change your strategy to know more about these cases, and that will give you truth and probably justice. That will give you the links between cartel members or people who's doing or conducted violence in those areas of the Mexican territory, and also link it with the authorities. That's what the Ayotzinapa shows us. We never figured it out that there was the scope of this investigation. And it was by evidences that we had this big picture about how was the corruption in that small town in Guerrero, and with the big impact with federal even authorities. So my opinion is we need to change the strategy. And for example, they just produced a judicial reform 2 months ago, and one piece of this puzzle is not there, and is the prosecutors, attorney general offices at the federal level, but at the local level. And this is probably part of the main things that need to change to produce search and justice for the disappeared people.
Just before we ask our very final questions, maybe on those judicial reforms, I have understood, again, thank you, Margarita, for all the preparation that you did with all the questions here, that Mexico is due to be the first country to elect all of its judges by popular vote. This is meant to be a measure to reduce corruption, but obviously introduces a lot of concerns about some of the issues you've been speaking about the independence of the institutions like the judiciary. What do you make of those kinds of reforms, Omar?
I think I'm just going to take a step back and try to see the whole picture. Has been conducting several reforms in the last months that is very clear they don't like the someone observe them and try to make like adequate resolutions against what they wanted to. And I'm talking about, for example, it's not only the judicial reform, which is probably the most important one, but last week they just canceled the different independent and autonomous mechanisms to they were really important because they produce an eye inside the state and the government authorities. And I'm talking, for example, the National Institute for Access of Information. And it was an exercise for the rights of the people in Mexico, and they just canceled that possibility. Now it's going to be an entity inside the administration, inside the government, who will conduct this or which will try to protect those rights. So this is a setback of the that strong state that we knew in Mexico. I mean, there's another experiences voting for judges in Bolivia and another country, US, for example. Do we really need these kind of measures? Probably the answer is no, because also I think part of the important work, for example, in my experience as a prosecutor, I have to say that we have great satisfactions working the law with professional judges, people who really knows about the law, knows about these crimes, and this is just something that the people who produce those reforms probably doesn't even understand what they're gonna do in the future, and it's gonna be problematic in my view. It's really unfortunately to have this kind of loss now, and because now the control of the government is by one party, and also they control the Congress and the Senate, and also probably by the way like is designed, the process of the election of the judges will be controlled by the same party.
That sounds very much like a neighboring country we know. So thank you so much for this explanation. As you know, we have this podcast, which is also very much followed by legal geeks, and I have seen your CV, and I imagine you are a bit of a a connoisseur of court cases that you had to follow. So we asked the question, do you have a favorite court case that you worked on or that you were an observer to, or one that served you a lot in looking at the cases you do, or one that you just like talking about at dinner parties?
I wanted to record one experience that I have. I had the opportunity to receive a training in Chile in 2007 by Professor Salaquet, Jose Salaquet, he was in a real institution about this process. He worked in the Vicaría de la Solidaridad in Chile, saving people from the dictatorship in Chile. I mean, transitional justice is something that there's a big development in Latin America. We had lots of experience. So any case that you can turn to see it, it's amazing because you understand how probably the system used to work and it keeps working probably the same eyes, but the same vision, by the same structures. And I remember one thing that Professor Salaquet told us in that training in Santiago, Chile. He told us transitional justice is a small door that someone opened by political decision, by the context, something happens. But when they open the door, you need to go inside and go deep in the fastest ways that you can and with the better result that you can get. And probably that's part of my, conducting this investigation inside the Attorney General office in Mexico wanted to produce. I mean, there's obviously like Latin American history is being written by this kind of cases. Any case that you take, you will open a window of big knowledge and great people and discover how the way it's important to produce justice. And probably like a final reflection about this case is that we don't have the 43 students together now. They are not with the family. We don't have sentences of the responsibility of the people. Probably we will have in the future. And also, we did not open probably a strong accountability process for the atrocities of this case, and also the other atrocities of many, many people disappearing, tortured, and executed in Mexico. But one thing that I just rescued from my experience conducting this investigation is that we try to do probably a different change. It's a small one. And we need to observe the process that we did that. And the process is what it shows us that probably justice is not one goal or just one result at the end. It's the process by itself. So I learned that from that training in Chile many years ago, and also that was part of the reflection that I had with the experts, with the family members, with the lawyers, the NGOs that join in doing incredible work around the families.
And finally, Omar, our very final question, which you probably know if you've listened to the podcast before, is there anything that you've been reading recently or listening to or watching that you would like to share with other members of the audience? And it can be from within this field, or it can be something that's, what you use to get away from this field.
Working here in Berkeley, I've been reading several books about, psychological health, because that was part of the things that I need to do when we flee Mexico. But I keep reading novels. I like novels. I like fiction. I mean, lately there's great writers in my country that reflects the violence in Mexico. My favorite novel, she won a prize a couple months. Her name is Cristina Rivera Garza. In Spanish is El Invencible Verano de Liliana. That's a great novel because it's the search of the writer. Her sister, she died by hate crime, and she digging inside the Mexican system to investigate her own crime of her sister. So it's an amazing novel.
Great. Thank you very much for that. And thank you, Omar, for sharing your extraordinary sort of connection to this particular case in so many different forms, and what insights it tells us about Mexico and the challenges of justice in Mexico. So we would hope to be able to check back in with you maybe in a couple of years' time when you'll be in your next form, whatever that will be, I'm sure. Again, you're not going to let this case go, are you?
I would try to, be away. Obviously, it was hard because the people invited me to talk about Ayotzinapa, and also I have an eye in Mexico, so it's hard. It's hard to leave Ayotzinapa. It's the case that just be there in my life for many years, but I just try to put some distance, just even for healthy reasons. And it was really hard. The impact is they remove me like so fast, and then to see myself and what's next, what I have to do, and just go away, and then just recreate your life and try to think who you want to be or what you can do. And I'm there. I'm just trying to figure it out. What's next? That's important for the future. I think for my future.
Yeah, we really do hope to see you in your next iteration. Maybe not about this case specifically, but maybe you will come up with some more general ideas about transitional justice in Latin America and how your example of this case can be used to improve on other cases or for other people. Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much for this space. Thank you so much for the reflection.
This was Asymmetrical Haircuts, your international justice podcast, created and presented by Janet Anderson and Stephanie Vandenberg. This episode was created in partnership with justiceinfo.net, an independent site covering justice efforts for mass violence, and with the Hague Humanity Hub. Music is by autonautics.com. You can find show notes and everything about the podcast on asymmetricalhaircuts.com. This show is available on every major podcast service, so please subscribe, give us a rating, and spread the word.